Going to just record this session. And so then also the last piece, I want to remind everyone to use today's conference hashtag NYC Schools with an S inclusion in your social media posts. And then the last but not least, I know everyone's excited about CTLE credit. I will drop a link in the chat box for everyone on how to do that. It's also available on the conference hub. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to today's presenter, Laura Ogando.
Hey folks, so glad you guys are here. I hope you're feeling pumped. I just was noshing on some lunch and watching those inspiring stories. And I swear, man, this is why we do this work, right? So hopefully you're feeling as excited as I am. Let me go ahead and start my screen share here so we can get going. We've got a great presentation for you today. We are going to be talking about writing for effective translation and writing in plain language. So super stoked to have all of you folks here and continue this fabulous day of learning on election day. So here's our agenda. We'll do some introductions. You'll find out who I am and a little bit about our team. Then we're going to go into effective translations, right? And what does that mean? I'll point you in the direction of some tips so that you can write, so that your content can be better translated. We're also going to go over how to write in plain language. And the two, while they are separate, they oftentimes work hand in hand. If you're writing in plain language, you're going to write for better translation. So these two work in tandem. Then we'll have some time for Q&A. And as Kelly said, we'll wrap it up and we'll give all that information out about CTLE because I know that's why you guys are here. All right, so we are the Office of Digital Literacy and Inclusion. My name is Laura Ogando. I'm one of the program managers for the team. I've been with the DOE now for 11 years. I started out as a self-contained teacher, did that for 5 years, worked in ICT, and then before this position, I was my school's digital literacy specialist. So I've been working with students with disabilities for my entire career, integrating technology into our content areas, and now most recently, making sure that all of our digital content is accessible. A few other folks on my team. We have Lisa Nielsen, our senior director, who spearheads a lot of this work. And with me today, we have Latiqua Spivey. She's on the back end. So please, 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 if you haven't done so already, open up the chat. Definitely introduce yourself, but also notice those links that she has posted in the chat. You have access to this presentation, but I also really encourage you to check out future sessions. Our team puts on PD regularly throughout the week. So if you're looking to get more, please check out our learning calendar. That's at digin.nyc/learningcal. We're constantly updating that calendar with new course offerings. So if you like what you see here today and you're like, whoa, I didn't know about accessibility. I didn't realize this was such an important thing. I got to get on this because I'm a little behind the 8 ball. No worries. Like I said, check out that learning calendar, bookmark it, and then join us for some sessions. We're constantly putting these on. And like I said, our office is here to help you. All right, so let's get underway. Why is this work important? Well, I don't know where you've been today. Hopefully you checked out those really inspiring stories and you see why some of this work is important firsthand from folks that benefit from it. But in case you didn't, remember 50% of our residents speak a language other than English at home. And this is so important, right? Oftentimes when we think of accessible content, we're thinking about our folks with disabilities. And yes, that's obviously an important population. But there's another set of our population that it's not even about disability, it's about language. And here in New York, we are a melting pot, right? We have all the cultures from around the world here in one. And while it's amazing and, we get to connect with so many different folks, at the same time, it can also present a challenge, right? There's that language barrier that may exist. And we've got to tackle it, right? We've got to find a way to connect with those parents, especially now when many of our students are relying on a family member or a caregiver to help them access what's in the Google Classroom, to help them get started with a remote learning assignment. we know that many of our families have become de facto educators. So we have to make sure that we are making content that they can easily translate on their end. So, writing for effective translation, what do we do and how do we address this? Well, the purpose of effective translations ensures that everyone gets an inclusive experience. Again, this is not just about our students. In fact, this is about our students and their families. We want to make sure that everyone gets the benefit of the information that you're sharing. We also know that speakers of all language can access your content. Now, there's been a little bit of confusion around this. Some folks think you need to provide the exact translation. Now, that obviously is like the very, very best if you can take the content you've written and provide it in every single language. But we know that that is oftentimes very time consuming and virtually impossible to do at the school level. Even for the DOE, right now, we only translate for 9 languages officially, but we know that there are so many more languages. So when we write for effective translation, what we're going to do is we're going to write so that a user who speaks, say, Afrikaans can easily get that information in their language. The user sets it on their end, and then they are able to access all of the material because they've got it set for them. So there's nothing you need to add. There's not like a widget. Some folks have asked about that. But when you write for effective translation, it puts the user in the driver's seat. They can then take your content and put it in the language that they need. So this is so key right now. And remember, this is not just about, our folks that speak another language. When we write for effective translation, actually our content is more accessible to everyone. We've all, had that experience where we read content and it's written, just so complex, so wordy, so verbose. We're clearly using all of our 50-cent words and whatnot. I don't know if anyone knows about those. My teacher used to do like the big 50-cent words. But the truth is sometimes when you read that, you're like, what? I got to read that like twice, 3 times to understand what's happening. We want our content to be accessible to all, not just obviously our folks that need it translated, but to everyone. No one wants to have to read something 3, 4, 5 times to just get the gist of it. So when we write for effective translation, it really does benefit everyone. Now, a couple of key things to keep in mind. So when we're writing for effective translation, we want to lower the reading level. So that means that we're writing at roughly a grade 6 to 9. If you can even push it down to grade 5, that's honestly the best. But that's typically where we want to write so that, a middle schooler could read it. We also want to be mindful of sentence subject language. All right. Now you might be going, oh boy, Laura, we're getting into like grammatical stuff and my subject and my object and all that stuff. Listen, I get it. Not everyone's a grammar Nazi. It's okay. But we do want to be mindful of making sure that the subject in our sentence is clear. We also want to include those relative pronouns, words like that, which, they connect things. So relative pronouns are also really, really important. Now, in terms of lowering the reading level, when we're writing, we want to use simple, everyday words. Short sentences, we want to write in the active voice as opposed to the passive voice. And we even want to write out dates. Now, you might be going, what's the big deal? Why do we need to, write out our dates? I can't just write, today is 11/3/2020. What's like, I need to write that out? Well, yes, 11/3/2020. In other languages, they don't put the month first. They actually put the day first. So if we're expecting our translation to come out accurate, we'd actually want to write November 3rd, 2020, because 11/3/2020 could actually be interpreted as March 3rd, 2020. Or I'm sorry, March 11th, 2020. So that's the reason why you'd want to write out your dates. So here is some more about that subject writing for those of you that are wondering why this is important. So as you see here, we've got this original example. So Chet's class went to a museum. It is in Queens. You see, when it gets translated into Spanish, because we've got this it here, right, it gets translated into Spanish. And then if we were to retranslate it into English, it now reads, Chet's class went to a science museum. He is in Queens. But that's not the original intention of my sentence. My sentence is to say that the Science Museum is in Queens, not Chet. So this is where subject writing is really, really important. We want to make sure that we're saying the Science Museum is in Queens. When we use it, that it actually can be misinterpreted. As you can see, when we retranslate it back into English, it's now thinking that Chet is in Queens. Chet might not be in Queens. Maybe he is in Queens, but it's not clear from this translation. So we want to make sure we stay away from things like it, and we want to be really clear. We would want to write this out as Chet's class went to a science museum. The museum is in Queens. See the difference? We also want to make sure that we use the same word for the same subject. So look at what's happening here. We've got Chet's class went to a science museum. It is in Queens. That is a city with many schools. They educate many students. Whew. Now, you already saw what happened on the last slide with the word it, right? Oop, hold on. We already saw what happened when we use it to replace the noun. So look at what could potentially happen, right, when we've got 3 examples of this. So instead of using it, then, that, and they, we would want to say Chet's class went to a science museum. The science museum is in Queens. Queens is a city with many schools. These schools educate many students. Now you might be going, man, like, really, I gotta say all that? I have to be that clear? But the truth is, this is going to yield a way more accurate translation. Translation often uses AI, artificial intelligence, and so it's going to give a pretty good translation, but it's not perfect. When you use, right, the clear noun, and when you're specifically referencing science museum, Queens, schools, it's going to translate better. When you say things like it, that, they, them, that's when it becomes a little murky, and the translation may not be as accurate as you think it is. So this is the reason why we want to make sure that we're being really clear with our subject. Spell it out, write it out. Don't just assume that if you've mentioned it already in the sentence before, that it or them or they is going to suffice. It's usually not. It's actually going to lead to a poor user experience. All right, so here are those relative pronouns. So we want to include our relative pronouns, words like who, whose, whom, which, and that. These words connect the noun to its description. So the example you see on my screen, this is the book everyone is talking about. Now, if you're an English language speaker like I am and you speak it well, the first sentence sounds pretty good. You know what it means. You know what's being said. However, the best version of the sentence is, this is the book that everyone is talking about. It links the book, right, with its description. So we want to say this is the book that everyone is talking about, because when it gets translated into that other language, that's going to yield a better translation. So I'm going to pause right there because I know I've gone through a lot, and I want to make sure if anyone has any questions about this so far, that I give you some time to pop this into the chat. So I'm just checking things out, making sure that folks are getting the support that they need. Awesome. And you know, Jill, it's all about these little tips. I'm telling you, when it comes to accessibility, when it comes to writing for translation, it's minor tweaks, right? Minor tweaks that are going to help make our content just that much more accessible. And it's going to lead to a better user experience. All right, and I see folks are saying they're good to go, so I'm going to keep going. But please, 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 if there's something that's confusing or if you're not getting something, pop it into the chat so that I can help you out. All right, so writing in plain language. How are we going to do that? So, plain language, for those of you that don't know, is writing that's designed to be easily understood by all readers the first time it is read. That goes to what I was saying before. We've all been there where we read something and it's like, wait, what? What did I read? Like, that was such a complicated, long, drawn out sentence. So we want to make sure we're writing in a way that's easy to understand. Remember, that benefits everybody. That benefits someone like me. I can't tell you how many times I've had to just process something and read it several times because it was written in such a way where it was so complex. It's like 3 sentences shoved into one, right? So we want to make sure that we're writing in a way that it's understood by readers the first time. That's really the goal of plain language. It's also better for a lot of other things, right? It makes your information more easily found through online searches. It's understood by all readers, including those with disabilities. And again, it's going to help with those translation tools. But also keep in mind, even for your students, I'm an elementary educator at heart. For your littlest ones, when you write in plain language, it's also going to make it a lot more easier for them. So we want to make sure that when we're writing in plain language, we're understanding really how wide this is for everyone. This is not just translation. I can't say that enough. This is going to benefit everyone, your students, their families. It's easier reading, right? And I always love this little cartoon because I think, sometimes that's what it's all about. We have this long, wordy, verbose, it's too many words, too many big words, and we just want to boil it down to here's what it is in a nutshell, right? Okay, and I'm just, like I said, noticing the chat. So, and Galen, you bring up a really good point. So in terms of education, here's what I can tell you about some tips. We use a lot of acronyms here in the DOE. We're an alphabet soup, right? We got IEPs, we got DIIT, we got this, we got all these acronyms. One, you want to spell your acronyms out, okay? You want to try and do that. And I know that when it comes to the IEP, that individualized education plan, there's a lot in there and it's written at this really, really high level. We want to break down the information. We want to make sure that we're writing things in a way that conveys what we actually mean. So we get it. You all went to school, you have masters. Put it in the document what's actually happening with the child. If they're having difficulties with math, if they need something broken down, say that. We don't need to use all this like super wordy language to say something very simple. So my advice, like I said, with some of the education terms, first of all, don't use acronyms, but secondly, try and boil it down. You have to remember that for many of our families, that IEP document is also very inaccessible because of the way it's written. So if we put more plain language in that type of document, folks are going to understand what we're even trying to do. Because I can tell you right now, I've written so many IEPs and so many families would literally look at me and go, okay, so what does that actually mean? And you know that when you've got families asking you that you're not writing in plain language, right? You're writing for an education audience. But do consider that when you are writing an IEP, when you're writing for your school's website, when you are, creating a document that you're going to send out to your families, it's for families. It has to be read and consumed by them. So if you're writing something and it's going to be, not accessible to that particular population, then it's like it's useless. All right, let's keep going. Again, remember, pop things into the chat. I'm monitoring and I want to make sure that all of your questions and concerns are addressed. All right, so when we are talking about plain language, we obviously need to think about our vocabulary, and this comes up a lot. So we want to think about those tiered words. You've got your tier 1 words, which are your frequently used words: clock, baby, happy, walk. Again, as a former elementary school teacher, I'm thinking about like those snap words, your sight words, like those are words that you use all the time. Then we've got our tier 2 words. That's what we call general academic language. That's going to be used across domains. So what that means, words that are not just applicable to science class. Those are words that I'm going to use in science class, but also in math, in social studies, in art, in music. So as you can see, we've got some examples, but things like obvious, complex, establish, verify, observation, right? Those are words that I'm going to use regardless of what academic subject I'm in. Then you have your tier 3 words. Those are words that are domain specific. So I'm going to use them when I'm learning about a particular type of subject. So for example, some education words, we've got scaffold, inquiry, pedagogy, rigor, right? Those are those domain specific words. And I think to Galen's point, these are some of the words that oftentimes appear in an IEP. We're using these terms, scaffolded instruction. Well, what does that actually mean? What are we providing, right? That's where we can break that term down and say, we're going to provide some targeted support that starts out with lots of support and gradually fades. That says more than the word scaffold. It's actually more words, but scaffold doesn't translate in a lot of languages. So you're putting that term into, say, an IEP, or even if you're talking about what you do on your school website and you've got it in the about section of your school, and it doesn't mean anything. So it's better if you use, several more words and you break down one of these tier 3 domain specific words. And again, just check in the chat to see what we've got here. So I see a lot of folks saying, let's see. So Margarita, yes, some of the acronyms may not translate, perfectly, but that's why. So if you've got an acronym that you are spelling out, you can write individualized education plan, and then in parentheses you want to put IEP, and then throughout the rest of your document you can reference the acronym. You can also, for folks, the first time it's being used. So if I'm writing, something and talking about the IEP, I might say, the IEP is what we will use to, describe the child's education plan for this school year. Sometimes it just takes a couple of extra words. When we talk about writing in plain language, it doesn't actually mean using less words. And maybe that's a misconception. What we want to do is we want to keep our ideas simple and short, but we may actually need to use more words to convey meaning and what we're trying to say. So it may mean that you are writing more sentences, but they're shorter and more descriptive of what's happening. All right. Now, the other thing we want to do is we want to make sure we're using active voice. So when we use passive voice, what happens is that the subject is unclear. So we've got a couple examples on the screen here. So you see it says lining up will occur at exits 5 and 6. Well, what's happening at exits 5 and 6? Who is lining up? Is it kids? Is it parents? Is it staff? The subject is left out. Second example, a referral should be made to the nurse. Well, who's making this referral, right? Again, the subject is unclear. So when we use the passive voice, we don't know who is doing the action. of the sentence is doing the action. So then that is clear. So now you see these two examples and they're way better. The first example says students will line up at exits 5 and 6. Now I know who's doing the lining up. The second example says parents and caregivers should make a referral to the nurse. Now I know who's doing the referral. So we do want to make sure that we are using that active voice as opposed to the passive voice. It makes your writing way clearer. We know who's doing the action. And I'm, again, just looking in the chat, making sure we're good. And yes, this is oftentimes a big problem. We do tend to write a lot in that passive voice. So this is one that it takes a little practice and work with if you're wondering like, oh, what do I do? But practice. Oh, here we go. Now, if you do need more support, here's what I'm going to tell you. And we've been saying this in a lot of our classes. One, we'd love for you to take another class with us. We've partnered with Otis and Tech. They've taken a lot of our content and made them into beautiful webinars. So take an accessibility class with Otis and Tech. What's really nice is that you can take these at your own pace because they're all on demand. We've got this link right here, and Latiqua will pop all this into the chat one more time for folks, but you can take an on-demand class with us. And what that will do is, again, you can access it today, you can access it tomorrow, on the weekend, whenever you have time. And what's beautiful about it is not only can you do it at your own pace, but you're still going to earn CTLE, which I know a lot of you folks love. So you can earn CTLE and you can meet the principal's compliance checklist requirements. We know that many folks on here today are webmasters, and we know that you need to take those 3 hours of accessibility training. So this meets that requirement, okay? The other thing that you can do is you can access our learning calendar. Again, Latiqua has just dropped that link into the chat. I highly recommend that you bookmark the learning calendar. That's a place that you can get even more support. We offer so many classes and those tend to be live. So if you're, you've done some of the tech classes, okay, you've done the on-demand, but you want some live sessions, come to our learning calendar. We're constantly updating and we take requests. So if there's something that you're not seeing, but you're like, man, I wish you had that. We need more support with this, that, the other, let us know. You can always, tell us that you need more support in a particular area. We actually were on a call last week and we decided we're developing a whole set of classes based on some areas of need. So definitely check those out. The goal of our office is to provide you with as much support as possible. So, popping into the chat again one more time here, and I see we've got lots of folks who are in the chat. I love it. Oh, and thank you, Roy, for sharing that. That's a great tool, Randall Munroe's Thing Explainer. That's a great tool. And then Rebecca, I see you asking about like those terms like psychoeducational, right? And yes, what you should do is you can say, the psychoeducational report is a report that measures, and then say what it measures. And again, try and use that plain, simple language. Oftentimes we assume that folks know what we mean, but you have to remember, we're the educators. We went to school, we know what we're talking about, but for our families, they may not. They may not understand what that term means. So adding an extra sentence to say what the psychoeducational evaluation is, that will absolutely help. All right, so we've got just about, hold on here, we've got just about, I think, hold on, about less than 15 minutes. Sorry, I couldn't see my clock. But I want to leave this time for folks to ask questions that I can answer for you. And oh my goodness, give me 1 second here. Oh, and thank you so much, folks. I'm glad that you're finding this helpful. This is a more expedited version of our class, just to be clear with all of you. But please, 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 that's why I'm saying check out some of our other sessions. Come back, check out what we have both on demand, but also check our learning calendar. We do deep dives into these topics. In fact, each one of these, writing in plain language and writing for effective translation, they're actually their own separate courses. So that's why maybe some of this felt just a pinch rush, but it's because we're taking two classes and combining them into one for today's session. But please, like I said, utilize this time to pop your questions into the chat. And I'm like I said, I'm just looking into the chat, and yes, we know that a lot of folks contribute to the IEP. The IEPs are, and I see so many questions about this. IEPs are notoriously inaccessible documents because you have a lot of folks who put things in there and don't explain it. So I know that the psychologist is oftentimes going to put all their testing data in there. Our psychologists used to do the same thing. Having, a breakdown of what things mean and written out in plain language is very helpful for folks. There's no set limit, I think, on an IEP. You can write as much as you want. It's not limited by character, so you really can make that a lengthy document. Again, writing in plain language is not about, making your content short. It's about the sentence structure being shorter and simpler, but you may actually need to use more sentences to make something a little bit clearer. And Marie, you're asking about a dictionary or glossary of accessible language. We don't have a dictionary or glossary of accessible language, but what I can tell you, and again, we go into more of this in our expanded versions of these courses, but what you can do is you can check the level of your writing. So oftentimes, if you're in, say, Microsoft Word, you can actually go into the readability statistics and it'll tell you what percentage of your sentences are active versus passive. It'll give you the Flesch Kincaid reading level. So if you're trying to gauge just how accessible is your writing, you can use Microsoft Word and look at the readability statistics. In Google, they don't have it built in, but you can certainly download an extension that'll give you those readability statistics. But if you use that, that'll give you a good sense of where you're at. I think one time I looked at an IEP document, and when I just copied and pasted and put the terms in and whatnot, I saw that I think it registered at like a grade 35. If you can imagine that, right? Which means that you have to have some sort of higher ed degree in order to understand what is on there. That's not plain language. So when you're writing for an IEP, trying to bring down that reading level is going to be really, really helpful. And Roy, that is a really great suggestion. In fact, I'd love for us to collaborate on a document together because I know that oftentimes certain words come up. And obviously, there can be certain ways to describe the same thing. So I think that's definitely a great idea. And schools can then collaborate and find ways to say, like, if you mean this, say it this way so that it's more accessible. But absolutely. Oh, and that's a great resource. Roy, you are on fire. It sounds like you are definitely writing in plain language. So thank you so much for sharing those really great resources and links. Again, as with all of our accessibility work, it's not necessarily intuitive at first, but once you do it and you start making a habit, you can't go back. And once you learn just how inaccessible a lot of your content can be, it like doesn't sit well with you. And I think that's what a lot of folks are starting to realize. They're going, wait a minute, you're talking about plain language, but I'm sitting here thinking about all those IEPs I just wrote, and none of them are in plain language. And it doesn't sit well with you, because now you're realizing maybe my families don't know what that document says, and maybe they're not understanding what I've written, and that is problematic. So that's why you're going to do this more. You're going to practice this. You're going to come take more sessions with us. I love election day because of the PD. I love what this forum is all about. But remember, the learning does not stop today. I can't say that enough. The learning does not stop today. Hopefully you are going to be learning across the entire year, because that's what we teachers do. We're lifelong learners. So please check out another session with us. Please, if you need more help and support, reach out to our team. And let us know, because like I said, this is about helping you so that you can then help your students and your families. All right, so we've got just about another 5-ish minutes. Latique was going to go ahead and drop some of our exit links. I know we've got our CTLE information. So Latique just dropped it because she's so awesome like that. And I'm still here. We've got a few more minutes left to our session. So if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. Thank you guys so much. I'm so glad that you found this helpful and informative. Again, my goal is just to help all of you guys to reach your families, to get them the information that you want to get them, right? Especially this year, information is coming out, I mean, hot and heavy. We need to make sure that our families can actually access it.
Okay, so Laura, are there any more questions? I think that's
we're
about
good.
it, right?
I'm responding to one person who privately messaged me, but I think we're good.
All right, so you guys, if you have some more questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I want to remind everyone we're going to go ahead and take another break for about 15 minutes. We'll come back at 1:30 at the next session. In this room will be Cornelius Minor, so we're very excited to watch that session. You can access that through the conference hub again. Be sure to, during this break, go meet all of our vendors. After this break, we're going to start picking some winners that we'll announce after Cornelius's session in the closing session. So go ahead and visit those booths, and then we will see you all for the next session at 1:30. Thank you.
And folks, I just want to say thank you so much. It means so much that you guys are attending this session and that you are making accessibility something that you're putting at the forefront. So thank you all. I hope you continue to have a great rest of the Beyond Access Forum. Looking forward to seeing you in some of our sessions in the future. Bye, guys.